Willow, can you just check with them? If we could reconvene our meeting to open session. The board has been in executive session since 6 o'clock to discuss a tenure candidate, a personnel matter, and a contractual matter. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Introductions.
Dave Hurst.
Willow Bear.
John Walston.
Robert Tejan.
Jody Monroe. Holly Dellenbaugh.
Catherine Nadeau.
Ewan McKnight. John McPhillips.
Do we have any PIG students with us tonight? Welcome, thanks for coming. Your obligation is to stay until 9 o'clock or until the meeting is over, whichever one comes first. There are sign-out sheets scattered around the table up here, so make sure you sign out before you leave so that you get credit for being here. First up is our approval of minutes. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the minutes from the December 6th, 2023 regular board meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item 3, meeting reports. First is our superintendent's report.
Sure, thank you. So as you can see, we have many of our fall athletes here. Before we recognize them, I just have a couple of quick announcements. The first thing, actually, I'm going to ask John to just provide an update on the middle school auditorium design change that's on the boards for approval for the bids this evening. So if you just kind of summarize those, John.
Absolutely. So we met with stakeholders over the past week or so to compare and contrast the current footprint of the auditorium with what the architects had designed. And you may recall that as part of the presentations over the course of the past few months, we talked about leveling of the auditorium floor to accommodate a number of things, one of which is the students in the orchestra pit, and really to maintain some ADA compliance with the current slope of that floor. That floor was about 17 feet 8 inches from the front of the stage to where it would level off, and there was some concerns from stakeholders that that was really too much of a flat spot given the loss of fixed seating. There was an overall loss of seating in the current footprint design for a number of reasons, ADA compliance, larger seats and the like, also to placement of seats for better sight line for performances. So we're losing seats to begin with, and there was some concern that losing additional fixed seats that would be replaced with portable seats would pull a little bit from the visual aesthetic of the auditorium. We heard that feedback, we took it back to the architects, and designers were able to decrease that 17-foot flat spot to about 12 feet, which would allow for additional fixed seating in the wings and decreasing the overall portable seating. I think we had 96 portable seats the first time. Now I think we're down to about 40 or so, which still will provide enough flexibility to move the orchestra pit or students in and out without necessarily limiting the actual functional space of the auditorium. So that I think that worked to anyone's benefit. That design change did not necessarily result in any change orders or increases in the bid cost that you see in front of you tonight. So we will be ready to go should the board desire to move forward with the contracts that are on the agenda this evening.
John, does that impact, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go for it.
I forget there's other people in the room sometimes. Does that change, there was I know a concern about how far off the ground the stage becomes and
Sure.
goes from being sort of a stage to just kind of like
Yeah.
a platform?
So that was one of the concerns highlighted because it's almost three-dimensional here. Because you had to go back 17 feet, that actually decreased the height of the stage by almost a foot. And that's a comparatively relatively
Wow.
low stage compared to, let's say, the high school stage. So the concern was that by bringing the floor up almost a foot, you would lose a foot of stage clearance, which would maybe create some visual obstacles for children on risers, or just look a little odd if you're in the audience, because you'd be looking more stage level as opposed to what you may be looking traditionally up. So by moving the start of the flat spot from 17 feet to 12 feet, that actually minimized, you're still going to lose a little bit of stage height, but not as much as was originally proposed.
Yeah, they will gain back 8 more inches, so it's a significant change. So the staff were pretty happy about that. Yeah.
Catherine?
And then just to, if you would just perhaps repeat yourself, I apologize. You said that this change order would not result in a change in cost? Or
That's correct.
Correct. Thank you.
So presently, we're still looking at roughly a $4.6 million outlay of cost. We did have, in terms of budget, because of the number of things, including the timing of the project, which will be starting in January if the board so chooses, that timing, that it's an isolated project, we've got a significant number of bids from general contractors, HVAC mechanical, and I say electrical. So those three contracting groups, we got a number of competitive bids, which as a result drove down the out-of-pocket cost for the district.
Thank you.
Any other questions related to the
I have one
auditorium?
Well-
Just the actual loss in seating, where did it land? I know we have less portable seats than the original design, but what's the capacity loss overall?
You can give me a second, I can get that, I don't
Yeah,
remember.
I can't
It was
remember offhand.
350,
Yeah, I
I
can't
don't-
remember.
I have to look, but we were talking seating between portable and fixed. If you give me a moment, I will be
Just
able to get
curious,
that for
right?
you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So John's looking for that. There's also on the agenda tonight, there's an update to the substitute rate sheet that you've already approved. That's because there was an oversight, and we've been adding retiree rates for positions to try and attract more of our retirees to come back and sub for us, and we had overlooked the bus attendants, so that's the addition for a retiree rate for the bus attendant. That's why that's on the agenda again. And also, finally, before we get into our student athletes, we do have an opportunity to add girls flag football in the spring. It's something that currently there's about 10 to 12 schools that we have to do an official commitment to that program sometime in February. There's some grant money available from the New York Giants, who are donating, I think, a roughly $30,000, is that correct, to the league to initiate the program. We do have interest in that, so as long as the board is comfortable with us doing that for the next agenda item, because it's outside the budget process, which we typically would add these in. It'd be similar to what we did with girls wrestling, is that would be on the agenda for the board to not only approve the coaching positions, but the costs associated with that program, which will be roughly about $10,000. And the students would be able to play anywhere from 8 to 10 games probably during the course of the spring season. It would be a spring sport. So that will be on the next agenda item. If anyone has questions about it, feel free to.
Do we have a coach identified?
We have someone who's interested, but we would post for the position. But yeah, we do have some staff who are interested.
Any other questions about flag football?
Just that we know that other schools in the area are doing this as well.
Yep.
They're taking this up.
Yep. Last year, Troy did it as a pilot. They had to travel quite a distance because there weren't any other schools locally that were doing it. But currently, in my last meeting with superintendents, there's about 10, at least, maybe 12 that will commit to it. So it'll be a good number of schools.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
And speaking of athletes, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Keys to do some recognition of our fall athletes who did an outstanding job this past season. And yeah, we'll go over here and then Do we have anyone from? Oh, Joel wants to take pictures.
Yeah, we had quite a few tonight. I want to apologize in advance. I'm loading up on Paul's mental Olympus, so excuse me for my mouth. It's to prevent a massive coughing attack. Jody's experienced a couple of those in the last few weeks. No, it's been truly a remarkable fall for us. We had a tremendous amount of success as seen by the amount of our student athletes we're honoring tonight. And we also had truly strong seasons from our football, our boys soccer, our boys volleyball, all number one teams going into the sectionals. So with that, I'd like to first recognize our girls swim and dive, coached by Carrie Ann Santacola and Megan Plans. Overall, we came in second place at sectionals, and as is often the case in this for a distinguished scholar athlete team. So I'd like to introduce our state qualifiers, starting with Sage Blodgett. Sage qualified. Katie Ferreira. Okay, it's going to be a little while. Katie qualified for states in the 200 individual medley, the 100 meter breaststroke, the 200 medley relay, the 200 freestyle relay. Katie was the Section 2 champion in both the 200 intermediate relay and the 500 free. Katie was named the Section 2 Division 1 Outstanding Swimmer of the Year, as well as the Section 2 Division 1 Scholar Athlete of the Year. Lauren qualified in the states in the 200 medley relay. Natalie Hopper, a state qualifier in diving. Grace Long, a 200 freestyle relay state qualifier. Gabby Perry, 200 freestyle relay. And Olivia Scusa, who had an amazing year as well, 200 intermediate medley, 100 breaststroke, 200 medley relay, and the 200 freestyle relay. Congratulations. Thank you. Next up, I would like to introduce from our girls golf program, Anna Pellis. Is Anna with us tonight? Anna is a state qualifier and a huge part of our team as Bethlehem finished 8-5. Brand new program. It's our best record so far. We also came in 4th place in sectionals. And of course, this team was also a NISFA Scholar Athlete team. So congratulations, Anna. Good job, Anna. Next up, from our girls cross country program, coached by Tucker Strapowitsky and Darnell Douglas. Another incredible season. Just this program just continues to climb, not only locally, state, but nationally. 2nd place in Section 2 Class A. We came in 2nd place in the New York State Federation meet. For the 2nd consecutive year, qualified for the Nike Cross Nationals, which is in essence the National High School Championship. It's the only 2 times in our program's history, and 2 in a row. Finished the season ranked 11th in the nation, and also a NISFA Scholar Athlete team. So with that, I'd like to bring up Catherine Bannigan. Come on up, Catherine. Catherine is also a state qualifier. Anna Strapowitsky. Sydney Graham. Logan Kuhn. And Logan also is a state qualifier. Charlotte O'Meara, Liv Pachter, and Tess McNamara. Tess was also a state qualifier. Congratulations, girls. Being invited to the Nike Cross Nationals is a huge, huge honor. Only 22 teams in the country make it. Coaches, come on out. Don't be shy. Darnell, you love these. He loves the camera. Darnell does not love the camera.
Congrats. And our last team tonight, coached by head coach Scott George and Dylan Davis, who are here, our girls tennis team. They've become regulars here at this. Third consecutive Section 2A championship, defeating arch rival Saratoga 5-4 in a hotly contested finals match. First time in my 20-year athletic director career I had to reprimand an opponent at a tennis match. Parent, by the way. Next, the girls defeated Burnt Hills 6-1 in a sub-regional game. Then we defeated Section 3 champion Fayetteville Manlius 7-0, which punched our ticket to the Final Four for the third consecutive year. It's also only been around for 3 years, so we're 3 for 3 at the Billie Jean King Center in New York City. With that being said, I want to bring out the ladies. Elizabeth Amrabikian, Sahasra Hangalgi, Hope Brown, Joy Jiba, Camilla Heckman, Kripa Hangalgi, Shayna Uli, Captain Reka Kogut, Cecilia Nausch, Zara Pattison, Claire Riley, Nina Vargas, Sophie Wang, Captain Paige Davenport, Pravai Patel, Captain Kirsten Fang, Emily Semin, and Zila Siegel. Oh, and there's more. There's more to say. This is the whole team. There's more to say. Also, the doubles teams of Hope Brown and Reka Kogut and Eliza Amrabikian and Kripa Hangalgi also qualified for the individual doubles championship. And for the second straight year, the Times Union Coach of the Year, Coach Scott George. He's looking to renegotiate his contract. Great job, ladies. And of course, they were also a NISFA Scholar Athlete team. Just wanted to mention, other Scholar Athlete teams we had this fall were boys cross country, girls volleyball, field hockey, and boys golf. So a tremendous fall for the Eagles. With that, I hope you all have a very happy holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay.
You thought they were all coming for you, didn't you?
Good to see you.
I can't believe they don't want to stay for the presentations. Just remember your
Not a one of them needs credit?
Not 2 days before the holiday break. Through Friday. Some schools are off Friday. But those are schools, a lot of them that don't have the Jewish holidays off. Thanks, Mr. Keys.
Thank you. John, I can't believe all these people didn't want to stay for the audit presentation.
But
I can't believe they didn't want to hear about the
Veronica's very
audit.
disappointed.
Did you see how relieved she looked?
All right. Is that, that's it for the
yeah,
superintendent's
that's
report?
it,
Okay. Next up is our board report. First, I just wanted to congratulate the cast and crew of Clue. I had the chance to attend the show, I guess 2 weekends ago, and it was great. Everyone did a great job. And specifically, I'll call out Amy Roos and Jen Bailey for all of their hard work on the show. Second, you guys should have received in your email from NYSBA the booklet of the legislative priorities that is going to be delivered to all of the state legislatures, the governor's office, educational policy groups, et cetera. So if you are interested in taking a look at that, that should be in your email. And you also should have received in your email a notice that registration is open for the NYSBA Capital Conference and Lobby Day. The Capital Conference is on Friday, February 2nd, and the Lobby Day is on Wednesday, February 7th. So if that's something anybody is interested in, there is information in the email about how to register for that. And if for some reason you don't have it, let me know and I can forward it to you. We had two committee meetings since we last met. First, the Facilities Committee met on December 11th. And Bob, if you or John could report out
Sure.
on that.
Sure, so the Facilities Committee met with the Facilities Director, Nick. He reported on the various projects that were ongoing throughout all the campuses. He reported on a few design changes and issues that had arisen. The committee was satisfied with the oversight being extended and the due diligence with regard to the issues that had come up. And we had a successful meeting, and I think it's included in the materials, what was discussed today. So I think everything's going well. We're well within the bond projections and money. So it was a successful meeting.
Great, thank you. We also had a meeting of the Audit Committee, and for the most part, I think that will, during our audit presentation later, we will hear about that. But Willow, you wanted to report out on the conversation that we had with the claims auditor.
Sure, so we met on the 12th. I was elected the chairperson for the board of the audit committee. I'm laughing because I was the only one there at the time. We met with the claims auditor. For a while, he walked us through his background, talked about all the other districts he does auditing for, described his job as sort of like a reminder of what he does for us. Basically, he's the treasurer for our extracurricular activities, our tax collector. We talked about the role. There was some question about how much the board should be reviewing things, so we talked about that really being his job, that districts either have a claims auditor or they have the board reviewing claims and payments. So our district has the model where we have hired him to do that. Talked about what he does with those claims, reviewing them for accuracy, making sure the right tax exemptions were applied, that things like reimbursement for travel, the right rules were used. He described that it takes him a few hours a week to review those for us. He sometimes has questions and gets follow-up documentation that goes through John. The monthly summary is provided for the board with the log of his findings. He talked about things that he would flag for deeper review, like if something didn't follow the protocol in the right order or the incorrect amount was used. An example he used was when the IRS changed the mileage reimbursement rate this year. There were a lot of errors because we hadn't caught up with that in time, so there were a lot of those that had to go back and be readjusted. So that's sort of the process. He said that if board members ever had questions after the fact, those would come through Holly the way a normal board question would come to John, but that really it's not our business to sort of be in there. We talked about the provision of the education law that puts that into statute. He said he's only aware of one district where they use the other model where board members do the review instead of the claims auditor. But he really did sort of reinforce that he works for us, right? We hire him, he doesn't work for the district, he works for the board, that if he ever disagreed with something or had a real concern, that he would come to a board meeting, he would bring that issue to us directly. And that was about it with him. We met with our external auditor who will provide a report tonight. And internal audit-wise, there were a few small findings. We'll get a draft report in early January that we'll all review together at the time. I think that was it. Anything else that I forgot? Any questions?
Let me just say thank you for pinch hitting for me while I was unpleasantly absent from the meeting.
You got it. There will be more.
I look forward to it.
Anybody else have anything for the board report?
One small thing, I thought it was worth recognizing, I think Dana Di Giansante just became the 7th teacher in all of Bethlehem to get a national board certification, which is a pretty cool achievement. It took about 2 years to work through the various levels of certification, so I thought it should be acknowledged.
Next up are our student reports. Do we have anyone from Student Senate here? You want to come up to the microphone?
Hi, I'm Lauren Dudgeon. I'm the current treasurer of Student Senate. I'm a junior. I'll keep it brief. Last week we had a really successful caring and sharing food drive. Students on Friday, periods 1 through 3, were able to meet in Gym A, and we organized everything that was donated. Very successful, great time. And today we met again. We were unable to meet with Mr. Domel until a couple days ago, so we had originally been planning for a winter, I wouldn't say pep rally, but more like a winter fun thing for the students. We're looking more for it to be a wellness day. We just are now planning it now for February. We're thinking towards break, maybe that Friday or the week before that, so that as many students we can get there as possible. He said that we get 2 hours, so we're looking to do plan things in both Gym B as well as the library with clubs and teachers as well. So we're working on planning that now, but that's about it.
Do you know what kinds of things you're hoping to
We
plan?
we're looking to do more stuff with teachers. So we wanted to do maybe a basketball game with the teachers because we really liked the Police First Teachers game. That was really fun. We also recently held a dodgeball tournament, which was very popular. So we're looking to maybe do that as well. Activities in the library with clubs, it's more up to the clubs to do. We will probably get more information on that as we meet more about it. But that's about it. I think we'd have to confirm with Mr. Domel.
Sure.
For this. But
In the organization of all the food items, everyone did a great job with. We had a ton of food.
yes.
And we have a lot of leftover, which we can use for the backpack program
Mm.
or families as they need them throughout the year. So
Yes.
you guys did a great job with that.
Thank
Very
you.
easy to
Yeah.
bring out on Saturday morning, so.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I don't think there's anyone here from middle school.
I don't think so.
I don't see anyone from middle school. So next are presentations this evening, and we have 2 presentations, and the first is our audit review of our 2022-2023 financials. So, John, Veronica.
So I'm Veronica, I'm from MMB & Co., and as Willow and Holly alluded to, we had the audit committee meeting last week where we went through everything in much, much more detail, where we went through all the numbers and all the footnotes and the financials. So this week, or for today, we'll just kind of do an executive summary just to kind of highlight the things that we already talked about. There's two pieces to the audit. We have the audit of the financial statements of the district and then the extra classroom activity funds. For the financial statement audit, again, it was an unmodified opinion on the statements, which is a clean opinion. And then there's an unmodified opinion on the compliance for the major program, which this year was all those education stabilization funds, all that COVID money that you had coming in. In terms of findings, we had a repeated one for adjusting entries due to some entries made as a result of audit procedures. But there were two findings from last year that were corrected and we did not have to repeat those. And that was the general fund balance exceeding that 4%. I think this year we're at 3.7-ish. So that didn't need to be repeated. And then there was another one about procurement relating to the emergency connectivity fund dollars that you had received last year, but that was a one-time grant, so no need for that to be repeated. And as you noticed through the materials, there's no management letter this year, so there's no other comments or anything that we felt needed to be brought up. In terms of extra class, the purpose of that is just, to teach students about budgeting, reconciling checkbooks, running mini businesses, so to speak. The state has that specific guidance that they expect each district to follow, which can be a useful tool, and it's the reason that they're required to have an audit of those funds. And on this one, we do have a qualified opinion due to insufficient accounting controls just over the cash receipts at the point of collection. It's not unique to the district. Every district that we do, we just modify the opinion for that as a qualification. And the management letter for that is findings, recommendations, with some of the cash receipts, some of the support, but that's very not unique to this district. Extra class, it's hard to manage, with the students and the advisors. So that's that summary. We do want to thank John and the team for his help with all of the audit and, providing all the support. We ask a lot of questions, but we got there. But any other questions or anything that you guys might have?
I had a couple. One of which is really just, I think, to get into the record for the general audience. The top line shows us being $130 million in debt, which, as I understand it, is basically an accounting regulation. We have to account for the next 100 years of pension liabilities. Is this correct?
Yes, so that's just a liability that you can't really fund. You can't have an asset for it, so it just does create this large number based on the state's actuarial reports of what you might have to pay in over the future. There's nothing the district can do.
I mostly want to make sure that someone out there doesn't look at the
It does
$100
look
million
huge.
and go, what the heck? Yeah.
Yeah.
There were a couple of things that really struck me in terms of changes from last year. We appear to have gained about $50 million capital assets buildings and about $12 million in vehicles. It was like a tripling of our capital vehicle assets. What was underlying that?
So I think a lot of it was that big capital project that that a lot of progress was made on that this year. There was a lot of construction in progress, so that's definitely the biggest part for that. I don't recall being that big of a jump in asset in the vehicle line, but there was a lot of buses this year.
So 2022 was $4 million, 2023 is $12.5 million assets and vehicles.
John, let me know if you see.
It's right there. Yeah, you're right there. Well, that's weird. You've got a different number. That one number is different.
That is interesting. When did you pull this out?
It's just now, like 5 minutes
Ah.
ago.
I don't know where that is.
Any
Okay.
guy?
Now, the vehicles that Ewan's referencing were 4.1 million in 2022, 5.3,
I see a
5.4 on
5.3.
the
Yep.
vehicle side for 23, which really is associated with the addition of some additional buses, particularly EV buses.
So we have two versions of the document, and there are differences. It's not quite clear
Yeah, I'm not sure
why
what that
the
would
difference
be.
That I'm not really sure, because I know
Yeah.
that number
'Cause
shouldn't
we'll-
have changed from draft to draft
No,
either.
Which is very weird. That's why I was like,
Me too, I'm like, did I miss all that?
nah.
No, so I
But the
don't,
other numbers above and below are the same.
basically-
Are they
Yeah.
really?
I mean, they're not actually, like buildings, you got 134, I got 182. I don't know what's going on.
But if in
That's why I
fact
said
it was
it's
1 million, that makes sense.
Yeah,
if
that
it's
would-
the
that
4
would
to the
make more-
5, we're good.
This is on
I
page
think
We can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't see where you got that from, so we can talk about that.
Okay.
Happy to do so.
Anything else?
The only one I do want to highlight, if you go to the last page of the district's financial statements, you'll see those sections that Veronica had alluded to in terms of the findings and what they actually reference. You'll see two of the findings were cleared, but on page, I think it's page 74, I just wanted to highlight that the adjusting entries that you're seeing, while the dollar value of those entries are large, it's really sort of a timing issue from our side. There were prepaid expenditures, meaning that the district had recorded them in this fiscal year, and after review of the documentation, they really should have been recorded in the prior fiscal year. It wasn't an error in which funding was inappropriately spent or shouldn't have been spent. It was really just the timing of which fiscal year those entries should have been recorded. The other one, I just want to highlight, Veronica, Heather, and I, do I dare say, had spirited discussion, Veronica?
There was a lot of research
There was a lot of
involved.
research. A GASB missive from 1998 was dug up, GASB 33, in terms of how to record grant funding that the district does not receive directly. You may recall with the EV bus acquisition in 2021, it was $200,000 per bus that the district used to offset the actual purchase price of the bus. The grant funding from NYSERDA was never actually received by the district. It was turned directly over to Matthews Buses. The district, out of pocket, paid roughly $160,000 per bus. That is what we recorded on our books, in part because that's how the State Department of Education wanted us to reflect it on state aid applications. On the auditing side, GASB 33 highlights that even though you did not receive the funding directly, meaning it came into our bank account and then we provided it to Matthews, because we directly benefited from that grant funding, it should at least be recorded on our books as money in, money out. So I just want to highlight that because it does show as $1 million entry on both the expenditure side and the revenue side. But the two sides wash out, and the only reason that that entry is in there is because of the guidance from the auditors to reflect the grant revenue as revenue on our books.
So it doesn't affect the capital project fund at all?
It
It's
doesn't.
just to gross it up, but when we go to do the fixed assets and book the vehicle value, we want to put those at the value that they're worth. So, just to, as John said, to record the benefit of the $200,000 per bus. Very weird guidance, though.
Yeah. Went back and forth on it for a few days. But
Any other questions for Veronica?
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm all set, if you're all
Okay.
set.
Thank you very much for coming.
Perfect, thank you so much. Thank you, all have a good night.
yeah.
Our second presentation this evening is our academic update by Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's that time of year again where we sort of go through and review all of our academic data from the 22-23 school year. Some of this data comes into us sort of on a
Oh, Dave.
Oh, Dave.
preliminary basis, starting
There goes the PowerPoint.
no, in June. So, you know, throughout June and over the summer, that's when we start to look at item level data, which really, as you'll see throughout the presentation, it's really student level and item level data that we pay most attention to, because that's what really allows us to determine deficits and strengths at both the student and the curricular levels. So this presentation does support all of our district goals. Just a quick recap on our enrollment, as I'd just like to kind of point out where we are. With our declining enrollment, we're very fortunate that we've been able to maintain similar staffing levels that we've had when our enrollment was higher, which has allowed us to have class sizes that are very, very conducive to being able to individualize instruction and work with students. So you can see across the board, K-5, we're at about 19 students per classroom. And at the secondary level, we're also just slightly higher than 19 students per class. So again, that allows for students to just be much more interactive with the kids. It allows them to individualize instruction much easier. So we've seen great benefit
to having smaller class sizes for sure. So assessments, we have sort of our K-5 assessment program, we have our 6-8 assessment program, and then we have our 9-12 assessment program, or our Regents program. Just to recap, there are 4 performance levels actually for the 3 through 8 testing. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, where 3 and 4 are the ones that indicate proficiency. So you can see, notice missing is 2020, 2021. If you recall, 2020, the exams were canceled entirely. 2021, the federal government still required states to offer testing. So they basically reduced it to 1 day and took an old recycled test and just had kids take it to satisfy that federal requirement, but the data was essentially useless as it was questions the kids had actually been practicing. So the results really didn't mean a whole lot. But you can see that over time, our results are fairly consistent in the English language arts. Similar with math, although we did have this year, our proficiency level actually increased. Not loving the fact that the blue bar shrunk, because that, again, we want all of our students to be at that highest level. So while all our proficiency level actually went up overall, our number of students at the highest level did decrease. I should point out, though, that the tests this year, not unlike the common theme we've had, where tests have been changing from 3 days to 2 days to timed versus untimed, new standards. We are now back to past year's tests were on the next generation standards. So the first time those standards have ever been tested. So we did learn some things through that. So sort of trends that we had been used to in terms of standards that routinely showed up on exams, some of those dropped off and some new ones came on board. So those are some things that we looked at our sort of deep dive into the item level data. So there's just a quick snapshot of 3 through 8 for both ELA and math. Our proficiency levels have maintained pretty consistent over the since 2017. And then I'll just quickly kind of run through our grade level data. The one thing you'll notice, if you remember about 5 years ago, our opt-out levels were much, much higher than they are now, which is nice to see that students are taking the exams again. It's hard to get accurate data in terms of strengths and weaknesses of our program when you have a large number of students opting out. And if you recall, when students were opting out, it tended to be students that were on the upper end of things, so it painted just an awkward picture in terms of what types of things we need to work on. But you can see that our proficiency levels, while they might differ from year to year, our relative standing across the state really hasn't changed all that much. Also, you'll notice that they keep changing the test rate. In 2017, you can see that our mean scale score was 326 because the maximum was like 400-ish. And then the maximum sort of shifted and it was like in the 650s. And then all of a sudden, now we're back to this new number, 454. I'm not sure what the cap is now, but it's much lower than it was in the past. So that's why we really do try to look at where we stand relative to the rest of the state and schools that are similar to us. But you can see grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. We've really been pretty consistent since 2017 in terms of our standing across the state. And our opt-out levels are also pretty consistent. When we jump to the middle school, we do see a slight decrease in both students taking the tests and our sort of relative standing. And one of the things we're really struggling with at the middle school level is sort of students taking the test seriously. At that point, they start to realize that these tests really don't mean a whole lot for them. So I know in speaking with some parents and students, they don't always put their best foot forward. And we see that not only with the state testing, but also with iReady. So we have grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, again, very consistent since 2017. Again, once in a while you have these dips or spikes, but overall things relatively standing are consistent. But you can see the 8th grade has a much higher opt-out rate than some of the other grades. So it is good to say, okay, that's, New York State testing is just one measure, so how do other measures that we use sort of stack up? Now, it's not sort of apples to apples. The New York State test measures both reading and writing, whereas iReady only measures reading. But you can see that, and one has 5 levels, one has 4. But you can see, though, that they are fairly consistent in terms of, if you took from the iReady just sort of the darkest green, that almost lines up with the green from the New York State tests. And the red level is fairly consistent as well. So we do feel like we're getting at least somewhat of an accurate measurement by using multiple assessments. And these are not the only ones we use for students that are struggling. We do have even more assessments that we're able to dive deeper. We have things such as Dibbles, Hegarty, so that we can really dig in, especially at the primary levels. With phonics and phonemic awareness, we can really dig in to see where deficiencies are. On the math side, very similar story. Although overall our proficiency rates are higher on the math side than they are on the ELA side. But you can see, again, fairly consistent from year to year over time. And our opt-out rates for math are essentially the same as for ELA. Middle school, our 6th grade tends to do very, very well in math. And then 7th and 8th grade is where we see things start to decline a little bit. Couple reasons. One, we don't have as many students taking the test because by the time you take out the opt-out students and the students taking Regents exams, for Math 7, only about 80% of our students actually take the test. But you can see this year we did have a slight dip in terms of percentile with proficiency rates. So that's something, again, when we looked at the item level data, we did find a few standards that had not been tested in the past that are now being tested. Some standards that were tested heavily in the past that are no longer being tested. So that's some adjustments that we make. And we do that routinely anyways. But this year, typically the trends don't change. But now that we're basing it on, even though they're new standards in name, 95% of the standards remain the same, but they've changed their focus in terms of which ones they're going to test. And then you can see adjusted when we add in the students that did take the Regents exam. 8th grade, similar story, although this is one that we did find a couple of pretty significant deficiencies in terms of standards. There was a couple topics that were really heavily tested this time that had never been tested before, and our students did not perform well on those items. So we are making some adjustments there. But you can also see that only less than half of our students even take the test because we have such a large number of our students. Now, our Regents numbers are actually pushing into the 40% range. More and more of our students are actually taking Regents exams in 8th grade. And there it is as the adjusted. And similar to the ELA, you can see that if you look at the dark green from iReady compared to the green from the state test, fairly consistent. And again, even the light green is considered proficient on iReady, so it's pretty good correlation. iReady actually did a statewide correlation study about 4 years ago now, and there was a very, very high correlation between the way students performed on iReady and the New York State tests. Science, just to recap, typically there was a test in grade 4 science that went away last year as they're transitioning to grades 5 and 8. So this year it'll be grades 5 and 8. But you can see very, very strong results from our students, 97th percentile, regardless of which measure you're looking at. So this is where I kind of struggle a little bit. When you look at some of these results, on average, let's say 2/3 of our students come out to be proficient, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, when we get to high school, we have some of the highest, not only passing rates, but mastery rates in the state. So there's sort of somewhat of a disconnect there. Like, I don't understand how you would say that 33% of our students aren't proficient, but yet when we get to Regents exams, pretty much all of them get through, and a huge percentage not only get through, but they get through with 85 or higher. So there is, in my mind, a disconnect between the 3 through 8 testing, Regents testing, and then also AP testing. Just a reminder, we had this clause last year as well. This is sort of the COVID correction, if you will. Students that failed the exam with a score between 50 and 64 would still get credit for that exam as long as they were passing the course. And we had students take advantage of that. So across our exams, you can see our students continue to do quite well across the board in our English classes, our math, both at the middle school and the high school. And this is what I was just talking about, right? So in terms of percentile, and the mastery column is really the one I like to pay attention to, because that's, you know, our students scoring 85 or higher, we're in the 97th percentile, 90th percentile, 97th percentile, 96th percentile across the state. So our students are not only passing these assessments, but they're mastering these assessments. Same can be said for social studies and science, and you'll see that our percentiles on these two are even higher on average. Social studies, our students, you know, they couldn't do any better. And then science, very, very, very strong results as well. AP, we continue to excel in AP as well. And on top of the results themselves, I think something the district is certainly very, very proud of is the number of students that are taking these exams. So we had 471 students for a total of 910 exams written, which means on average kids are taking more than 2 exams, which is great, right? And you can see our results continue to be extremely, extremely strong. We have on average 90% of our students receive a score of 3 or higher, which in many cases grants them college credit when they go away to college. And we also have, you'll see some of the exams only have 1 or 2 students taking. That's because students just challenge the exams. But you can see over time, even when our enrollment was, you know, pretty high comparatively, you know, our percentage of students taking the exams was fairly consistent. But last year it actually went up. We're up to 35% of our students taking exams. 910 exams written, 89% scoring 3 or higher, and you can see that number has been fairly consistent at about 90% over time. And there it is, just in graph form. But this is the information I think that really sets us apart, is this AP equity and excellence. And that's the fact that many schools are super restrictive in terms of who is allowed to take AP courses, right? So many districts have, if you don't take honors X and you don't score 90 or better in that course the prior year, you cannot take an AP course, right? And we do not have those type of prerequisites. Obviously, you can't take calculus if you only took Algebra 1, like there's a common sense prerequisite, but there's no sort of numerical grade prerequisite attached to it, right? We have students that you know, do extra work over the summer to try to prepare themselves to take AP courses because they want to push themselves. So we have a very, very high percentage of students that are taking AP exams, and not only are they taking them, they're excelling. Now, this is always on a lag of a few years, but you can see sort of the schools that we typically compare ourselves to. We have not only the highest participation rate, but our passing rate, which is students scoring 3 or higher, is almost as high as the next school's participation rate. So we have basically the same percentage of students receiving 3 or more on these exams as our next closest school has even taking them, which is super impressive, right? Because that means that we are allowing students to challenge themselves, we're allowing students to take these courses, and they are succeeding. Whereas some of the schools in sort of the middle to the bottom of this list are ones that actually have super restrictive policies, which you would think means, oh, we're gonna be super restrictive, so only the best of the best are taking these tests, but they're still not getting the same kind of results that we are. So I will continue to point that out year after year. And in fact, we are one of the districts, we offer, I think either the most or the second most of that list in terms of the number of exams, and we're always looking to improve. So you'll see tonight you're going to be approving some of the high school course changes. So next year we're going to be offering AP pre-calculus, which will allow us to capture some even more students that aren't in that calculus track. So as seniors, they still would have access to an AP exam. And then the other course we're looking at very closely, which next year will be offered for the first time nationally, is the AP African American History course. They just released the framework for that, so it might be a bit premature to try to offer that next year, but that's another course that we're looking at. Our graduation rate remains consistent over time, and again, it's the sort of the bottom 2 categories that we really pay the closest attention to is, you know, yeah, it's great to say we have 94% of our students graduating, but these 15 students that are either still enrolled or dropped out, like, what's their story? And our counselors do an outstanding job of making sure that they understand their story and do all they can to ensure that they're successful in whatever they do, even though they didn't make that graduation. So there are a couple topics I wanted to just touch on because these are committees that we've had either ongoing or that are starting up. The first is secondary grading. We actually started having discussions about grading at the middle and high school prior to COVID. Just looking at grading practices, consistency of grading, assessments, and then kind of COVID hit, so we took a little bit of a pause. When we came back, we were really trying to just get our curriculum back in order, so we didn't come back to it. But this year, towards the end of last year, actually all of last year, we spent time, teachers did a book study on Grading for Equity by Tom Feldman. And then this year, we've set up a secondary grading committee, which has a representative from both the middle school and high school for each of our curricular areas. And we've been meeting once a month as sort of to preset them for meeting with their departments to have discussions around grading. And I just want to kind of highlight what types of discussions we're having. First off, we're talking about like what are the elements of a grading system, right? So there's what teachers do on their day-to-day basis in terms of what goes in their grade book. Then there's what kind of goes home to parents 4 times a year on a report card. And then there's what ends up on the transcript, which is sort of a summary of all of that report card data. So we've been talking a lot about, what's the purpose of each one of these? How are grades in a grade book sort of, how do they come about? What things should be considered for grades, what things really are outside the scope of that should be graded. So those are the types of discussions we're having. And then within that, we're talking about, so there's kind of 3 ways to look at grades, right? So there's product, which is essentially your achievement grade, right? So typically you would think of that as tests, quizzes, projects, and things of that nature. And then there's process, class participation. Homework would actually be considered a process. Attention to detail, meeting deadlines. Those are all things that some people sort of embedded within their grading practice. And then there's progress. That's more, it's not really an issue here, but in schools that do standards-based grading, where all assessments and assignments are essentially cumulative in nature. So over the course of 10 weeks, if you're continually taking these cumulative assessments, it's really sort of the work that is at the tail end that matters most, right? So you might not even take into consideration what you did the first 5 or 6 weeks, because if you can demonstrate mastery the last 4 weeks, then that early evidence was just your sort of evidence of growth, right? So there are some schools that don't do averaging at all. They just take a look at where are you right now, because everything is cumulative. But we're not in that position, but we did talk about how some schools are doing things like that. And then the other discussion we're having is this whole idea of grading scale. Because as you know, right now we have a 0 to 100 grading scale, which is very unforgiving in that basically 2/3 of the scale are ways to fail and 1/3 of the scale is ways to pass, right? Whereas like a traditional letter grade scale, which about 80% of the schools in the country use letter grades, not numeric. New York's kind of an anomaly. The Northeast is an anomaly. About 80% of the schools in the country use letter grades. And as you know, most, I don't know what the percentage is, but I would guess it's about 99% of colleges use letter grades, which is a much more passing-friendly system, right? You've got 4 ways to pass and only 1 way to fail. So you might think, well, the issue with it is the power that some of those lower grades have. So we're having discussions around this, right? So if you, just a real simple mathematical example, if you get 100, 100, 100, and then a 0, your average is a 75. But if you had F, right, on a 4.0 scale, you're going to be in the B-ish range, right? Far different. So these are the types of discussions we're having. Many schools have moved to, if they're going to use a numeric system, they've set floors of, say, 50. So now each sort of, now you only have from 50 to 64 as you're failing. Now it becomes more in line with what a letter grade scale looks like. So these are all preliminary discussions we're having. No decisions have been made on any of this yet. At the very earliest, we might have changes to grading practices in the fall. But again, it really depends on where these discussions land and what types of recommendations are made from the committee. And then the other piece I wanted to mention, and this kind of goes to my enrollment slides, is just lab school. Because as you know, traditionally, we only run courses that are where at least 18 students sign up for them. Now, sometimes by the time it actually runs, there's fewer than 18, but that's kind of our benchmark. And lab school, just to kind of back up, when it was first introduced back in 1990, these were sort of the 5 pillars that it was established on, right? Interdisciplinary focus, so they were running courses like ELA and social studies combined. As you know, that no longer is the case. They emphasized fewer topics of study and greater depth. Well, when we went Regents for All in New York State, that no longer became a feasible option because you can't only teach the students 60% of the material that's when the state's requiring us to test on 100% of the material. Project orientation, again, some of that projects take longer in time, and it kind of goes in hand with the fewer topics and greater depth. Community spirit, and that piece is very much still in existence. And then do all this at an existing per pupil expenditure. And that's kind of why I wanted to look at the enrollment, because over the last 15 years, you can see that the number of students that graduate lab school has fluctuated greatly, where we've had highs of about 26, but we've had lows of 8. And looking at the current enrollment of lab school, we have 13, 23, 13, and 13 students. Which, when you break that down to a course level, you can see that there are very few courses here that are running with 18 or more students. So I just bring this up. This is something that we're taking a look at in terms of how can we sort of bolster lab school so that we're not running courses with 13 students, 10 students, and so forth. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention as well. And you can see, I mean, one of the big challenges is you have fewer students to choose from, right? So each year, your incoming freshman class has decreased by 34%. So whereas to have a full cohort of 25 to 30 students out of 445, right, to try to maintain that 25 to 30 students when you only have 300 students, again, smaller pool to choose from to begin with, but you're trying to maintain the same overall size of your cohort. It just becomes more and more challenging. And my last slide is this is just reiterating the priorities that Jody, when she did her State of the Schools in the beginning of the year. These are the academic ones. Refine and expand MTSS. So this year we have expanded MTSS into the middle school. So they are meeting on Fridays every week. And we're going through protocols very similar to what's happening at the elementary level. Some great discussions. So that is going quite well. Standards aligned curriculum, again, based on some of this assessment data, we've made some adjustments to curriculum. We had about 15 summer curriculum projects that spanned K-12. I think you've already heard about 2 of the big undertakings at the elementary level when we did the ELA presentation, talking about foundations at the K-2 level, and then at the K-5 level for math, introduction of Tang. And then data protocols, and this kind of, I mentioned this when I was just talking about the assessments, but we are using protocols from, it's called DataWise, it's out of Harvard, but these are just sort of systematic protocols for when you're reviewing data. We have forms that teachers and groups can follow so that they're looking at the data, they're making sort of noticing the wonders of the data, but then it's like, what are the action steps that are going to come out of this data, and what are the curricular ramifications from that? And I think that's all I have. Questions?
With respect to the grading that we're looking at, do we have a plan for outreach or education for our parents? Because I would, as much as I think everyone's watching our meeting.
Yeah, no. So once we determine which direction we're going to go in terms of the committees, we would have some sort of informational night. I know there's more sort of angst at the high school level because of the transcript ramifications and college. So I will say that part of our work has been, we've been working pretty actively with college admissions officers to just ask questions about grading and like, so for instance, the switch from, if we decided to go from numeric to letter grades, what impact would that have? And again, speaking with admissions counselors, they've basically told us that most of the transcripts they get are letter grades indeed, but they can handle anything. They get international transcripts, they get transcripts from schools that are standards-based, transcripts from schools that are numeric-based. What they really lean upon is the information that the schools give them in terms of how does their grading system work, and then they can kind of make determinations from there.
I could see people having a lot of questions about
For sure.
it. And I just want to make sure that they have a chance to convey those.
Yep. But a lot of our discussion is really more around sort of consistency of practice and common assessments. That's really where we're starting to put most of our focus. Because without sort of common assessments then it's hard to have accurate grades from course to course, right? So some departments are very, very much like, I'll use like Math 6 for an example. All the teachers give all the same tests, all the same quizzes. Their grading scheme's exactly the same. Whereas you might go to another course where all the tests and quizzes are different, and one teacher has tests and quizzes are 80%, participation is 20%, but somebody else has, it's like 50-50. So we're just also looking at sort of consistency issues so that when students should have similar experiences from course to course.
Questions for Dave? Catherine? Go ahead.
Just
Somebody go.
quickly, this year's data for third graders, this is the first time we've seen the third graders' data, and they are the ones who were in kindergarten in 2020. So I just wanted to see if you've been, specifically paying attention to that grade, because that was a big concern with them missing out on half of their kindergarten year. If you could just speak to that about where.
So, I mean, if you look at the proficiency rate actually went up from 2022, but the relative standing in the state is essentially the same, right? And that's for math. And if we look at ELA, proficiency rate went down, but relative standing really didn't change a whole lot. And I think that's where, I mean, the one thing we are fortunate is that by having iReady and some of our other assessments, we're looking at assessment data K1 and 2 before we get to this, and it's like, oh, what happened to this group of third graders, right? So we've been monitoring them for 2 years, or 3 years. We have not,
It's important that we,
For sure.
look at this slide in particular, and next year that we look at this current year's third graders, because they lost out on preschool, which is, as we know,
Correct.
so important. So I just want to make sure that we're really focusing on those kids.
Absolutely.
Ewan?
Couple. You mentioned the difficulty of getting the middle school students to necessarily take the tests as seriously as they like. But if you look at science, you're getting 97th, 98th percentile. Is there a difference now seriously they're taking those tests?
So there's a couple things. For the test itself is super, super predictable, and the teachers do an awesome job of making sure the kids are ready for, so 20% of the test is the performance task, which is been the same performance task for the past 30 years. So the kids they ace that part, right? It's just not as rigorous of an assessment, to be fair. It's not.
And at levels below AP, do we have an assessment of, let's take science as an example, right, of science proficiency at sub-AP levels? Because we have a lot of AP data.
Yeah, the
We have,
Regents data.
Eighth grade and so on. What do we have in terms of 10th grade data for proficiency?
Yeah, so either environmental science not environmental science, living environment or earth science, depending on which one they take.
Yep.
So we have the 4 Regents exams.
Okay. The only other question was graduation rates. So 93.8%. Where does that put us in terms of suburban council, the state, whatever?
So, as you know, the state just released the test data publicly on Friday. So that's why I was able to give you the percentiles for the state test data. They have not yet released AP data or graduation rate data or any other data. So that once I get that, I could have a better idea.
Sure.
Catherine?
First and foremost, I just want to say thank you and just really lift up that you just went through a phenomenal amount of really in-depth data. And when we look behind the numbers, what we see are families and kids and students and teachers and aides, bus drivers, everybody soup to nuts who are working to provide a great learning environment for our students. And it's phenomenal. There is more work to be done for sure, but I just want to really uplift that and give my heartfelt thanks.
And that's why I try to highlight, it's great to see high-level data, but that doesn't move the needle, right? We need to be looking at what's going on with our students that are struggling, how do we get them to move? And looking at this high-level data doesn't do that, right? Which is why we pull apart individual student data and then course data, question by question, to see where our curricular strengths and weaknesses are based on how students are performing on particular items. Yeah.
Thank you. Just two questions, piggybacking on Holly's question around grading. Did you say that this is a conversation happening now and we'll have some results of that conversation at the end of this year or for fall? Did I hear that correctly?
The fall would be the earliest we would implement. So we met, so we have two different sort of groups working in tandem. We have a district level committee which has one middle school representative and one high school representative for every one of our departments. So like we actually met today, that group. That group then leads their departments in discussions around this, and then they collect feedback and then come back to the larger. So it's basically been, we meet with the district level group, they meet with their departments, we then analyze feedback, and then we meet district level, next meeting, feedback. So the next cycle, we should have, I would say by February, we'll have a pretty good idea of where we're going to land.
Cool.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing more about that. Thank you. And then on the AP, just because I haven't had high school students yet, although it's coming at me at an alarming rate, did I understand correctly that students can challenge, you were using the phrase challenge a test, does that mean even if I'm not in algebra, I could just take?
So there's two different things. So you can, challenge the exam means, like, we don't offer Italian here.
Right.
But you, on the side, learn Italian, you come in and take the exam. That's kind of challenging the exam. And then we also have kids that like challenge themselves by taking a course that they weren't necessarily on a trajectory for. The one that I think is probably the most common is with the AP Calculus. Students that after taking Algebra 2 are like, oh, I don't have an opportunity to take an AP course, so they'll take like pre-calc over the summer, and then they'll take calculus their senior year, or they won't take pre-calculus at all, and they'll take calculus.
So in that case, are those students taking the AP course and then the test?
Yes, they're taking it,
Or are they
yes.
coming in and saying, I want to take
No,
the
they're
test?
taking the course and then the
Okay.
test. But they didn't necessarily follow the traditional trajectory into that course.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Thanks for clarifying.
Any other questions? Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Next on the agenda is our recognition of public comment on an agenda item. If we have any visitors who would like to address the board on an agenda item, now is the time to come to the microphone. Item 6, action items. A, finance action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following finance action items 1 through 7.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. B, professional personnel action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following professional personnel action items 1 through 4.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Quick question.
Yes.
What is Girls Who Start Club? Do we have anybody speak to that? No? Okay, we'll come back to that.
I can tell you what I'm pretty sure it is.
It's okay. I was just curious
I-
about it, and it's not,
I believe it's a club at the high school focused on being an entrepreneur,
very cool.
but I could be wrong, but I think that's what it is.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. C, support personnel action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action items 1 through 5.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. D, other action items. It is recommended by the superintendent that the Board of Education approve the following action items 1 through 3.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a quick discussion. At our last board meeting, a student came and spoke about our policy 5520, name and gender pronoun change, and suggested a few more changes that may be appropriate. And it was under my impression that we've looked into some of those changes that were suggested, and
They've been
people are
correct.
moving
Incorporated.
forward with
Right.
those?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that,
It was more how those systems they referenced were pulling the data, so
Right.
Bruce Turk made changes with that, so that's all been addressed.
okay, I just wanted to make
Yep.
sure that those
Great.
changes have been addressed. Thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That carries. Item 7, recognition of public comment on a non-agenda item. If we have any visitors who would like to address the board on a non-agenda item, now would be the time to come to the microphone. Item 8, future meetings and events. Our next regular board meeting is on January 3rd, 2024, here at the high school, anticipating executive session at 6 and reconvening to open session at 7. The meeting following that is on January 17th, 2024. Again, anticipating an executive session starting at 6 and reconvening the meeting to open session at 7, and that's also at the high school. And then on Monday, January 20th at 6 o'clock, here at the high school, we have our policy committee meeting.
And I just want to flag, I've got a conflict with January 20th, and so apologize, but won't be able to attend the policy meeting.
Okay. Seeing no need to go back into executive session, can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.
I'm not gonna be.
We don't,
Folks
it's
can
okay,
come
because
up
you
and
only need
sign.
2 people.
I'm not gonna be able to.
Two different sources.